So you found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey there YouTube, the Dapper Dinosaur here. I am back for another Speculative Evolution update on Phase 2. We have 8 new creatures, and based on how many email submissions I still have to go through, we're going to get at least 2 more videos out of Phase 2 before we go on to Phase 3. But don't worry, that is going to happen, and Phase 3 is going to have a more structured submission guideline, so hopefully it will be a little bit easier to keep track of, and maybe a little bit less overwhelming. But without further ado, let's talk about our first creature. First up, we have Boreno. Boreno is a retinophyte with a nearly worldwide distribution. It lives commensurately with a number of organisms, serving as a cleaning station, removing organic debris from creatures small enough to fit through its rings, which it then breaks down for additional minerals and vitamins that it finds scarce growing on the rocks it calls home. Pictured here, a PropolioMesis mopsilidae is about to scrape itself past the bristles of a Boreno ring. Creature design by August Ristow. Boreno consists of a circular base with 4 trapezoidal sections facing outward and 3 to 10 rings vertically growing out of a cylinder attached to the top of the base. The bottom of each section is covered in water-sensitive cells and secretes a sticky substance to keep it stuck to the seabed. A cylinder protrudes from the center of the base. A bioluminescent stripe of chemical-producing cells loops around the middle of the cylinder. The top of the cylinder forms a hoop, from which 3 to 7 other rings will grow vertically, forming a tower. The hoops are used for photosynthesis and nutrient collection. The hoops also produce small internal air bubbles, keeping the plant upright. The very top hoop will form a small cone structure called an oovlet, which is used for reproduction. Oovlets will only grow once the final hoop is developed. Boreno can fuse sections, but only with its direct relatives. Boreno can tell what is and isn't a relative by using a chemical tag. These are produced in the bioluminescent stripe. When 2 Boreno sections touch, they exchange chemical tags. If half of the tag matches the others, the 2 will fuse. The chemical tags will move through specialized veins located throughout the lower half of the Boreno. Each trapezoidal section is roughly 3 to 5 inches from end to end. Oovlets are usually 1 to 19 centimeters. The first ring is usually 1 to 1.3 inches, and the base is usually 4 to 6 inches across. The hoops grow stiff bristles, which, while capable of gathering plankton in small amounts, are mostly used by creatures that can fit through the ring to scrape off ectoparasites, which the Boreno will then digest externally to gain additional nutrients and minerals. The bioluminescent stripes serve not only as the source for the chemical tags that allow Boreno individuals to merge, but also as a signpost for various organisms to find the Boreno so that they can clean themselves. Boreno reproduces asexually using its oovlet, which produces 6 to 20 buds that are released into the current every reproductive cycle. These cycles depend on available nutrients and sunlight. Boreno development is split into 6 stages. Stage 1. Once a bud lands on a sturdy surface, it will flatten itself along the surface. Its body will become a thin disc with a small protrusion coming from the center. It uses small clamps to hold to the surface. At this stage, it is 3 to 6.3 centimeters across and 3 to 4 millimeters tall. Stage 2. The disc will slowly enlarge and the development of its trapezoidal segments will begin, as well as the growth of its cylinder. The base is 1 to 1.4 inches across and 6 millimeters tall. Stage 3. The disc has completed its growth and is 4 inches long and 6 millimeters tall. The cylinder has almost completed its development and is 1 to 2 inches tall. The trapezoidal sections have also completely developed and begin to produce adhesive. Stage 4. Boreno loses its clamps and relies entirely on the adhesive to keep it on the ground. The first ring is developed out of the top of the cylinder, and the development of the bioluminescent stripe has begun. Stage 5. The first ring and bioluminescent stripe have finished development and are now fully functional. Boreno has begun to grow more rings from the top of the first one. And Stage 6. The final ring is grown and the oovlet has been produced and is functioning. The entirety of the Boreno is 1 to 2 feet tall. Boreno is found attached to rocks in shallow, salty waters all around Almaishah, except around Yama, southern Natash, southern Borea, eastern Ras Al Khab, and far northern Arctica. Genetic ancestors? Boreno. Scientific name? Phytophungopyrgos turamupupum. Origin? Retinal phyta. Lifespan? 4 local years. Average height? 30 to 60 centimeters. Next we have the Diocete. Diocetes are pelagic filter feeders inhabiting the frigid northern waters near Arctica. Pictured here, 2 Diocetes are feeding near an iceberg that has broken away from the northern ice cap and started drifting southward. Creature designed by Michiel Gillison. I'm not positive I pronounced that right, sorry. The first tagma of the Diocete is relatively basal, with the feeding appendages and the mouth in about the exact same position as in the basal-most paleotagmatans. The first and third pairs of limbs have evolved into powerful flippers. The first and second pair of limbs have evolved into powerful flippers. The third and fourth pair have evolved into powerful tail flukes, which it uses to move gently through the water. Each feeding appendage has stiff bristles emerging from the ventral side which are used in filter feeding. Diocetes have two sexes. Males and females meet and exchange gametes after clasping together ventral side to ventral side. After fertilization, the female will exude an ootheca, which she will adhere to the ventral side of her second tagma. After approximately 12 local days, the eggs will hatch and the young will swim away. Each ootheca contains a dozen to a score eggs, and the young are relatively well developed when they hatch. While there is no lack of filter feeders in the oceans of Almaishah, Diocetes avoid competition by being one of the few organisms well adapted to the frigid polar areas near Arctica, although they avoid shallower water. They are found in open waters around Arctica, but not under the ice sheet. Diocetes possess two pairs of eyes. The larger ones have evolved to have a very small resolution diameter, but they focus straight ahead, and their peripheral vision is quite bad. These eyes make it easy to detect small food items, while the second pair are on flexible stalks, which are used to keep an eye on predators while it's feeding. The feeding appendages are also still chemoreceptive, which helps in finding food and avoiding predators. Genetic ancestor: Diocete. Scientific name: Diocetus tetraoptus. Origin: Paleotagmata. Lifespan: 5 to 6 local years. Average length: 15 to 20 centimeters. Now we come to Geomastus. Geomastus is a filter feeder from the tropical and subtropical shallow waters worldwide. Creature design by Salty. Geomastus is a filter feeding descendant of Diocete. Their anterior appendages have developed into filter feeding arms. Each arm is coated in filter bristles, which will catch edible substances from the water and then be brought to the mouth. Its internal organ systems have developed distinct sections. Its nervous system has developed a distinct cluster of nerves in the head below the eyes, the start to a more complex brain. Its digestive system has developed 3 distinct regions: initial passage and the mouth to take in food, a chamber to break down food, and a long tube to transport the digested food and extract nutrients. The respiration and circulation system is much unchanged, with pumping being assisted by muscle contractions of the hydrostatic legs, and the blood being hemocyanin-based. Their exterior has shown one of the first developments of countershading, with lighter belly portion and a darker back portion. After Geomastus meet to mate, the fertilized eggs are released into the water column to ensure a wide dispersal. They can release hundreds of eggs at a time, ensuring that at least some will survive. After the fertilized eggs are released into the water column, they will hatch into larvae after only a few days. These larvae will swim in the planktonic soup for approximately 1 local month until sinking to the seafloor and transitioning into a juvenile stage. This juvenile stage is a miniature version of the adult, starting at 2 millimeters long. Over the course of 6 months, they will grow to their full size of 10 centimeters long. Spawning occurs each spring. Geomastus will climb to the tops of rocks or flora and extend its feeding arms to feed off the planktonic soup. Once an arm has collected food, it will be brought towards the mouth and run between the mouth feeding pegs to comb out any caught material. It lives throughout tropical and subtropical shallows where currents are strong and pelagic microorganisms are abundant. Genetic ancestor: Diocete. Scientific name: Geomastus duocolum. Origin: Paleotagmata. Lifespan: 4 local years. Average length: 10 centimeters for adults. And now we come to our third Paleotagmata in a row. They were very popular. We have Geomastus. The Geomastus is a carnivorous creature whose ancestors were the Diocete. While the legs, digestive system, reproductive system, and gills are nearly identical, there have been some changes. One of the least important changes is that the end of the body is a bit more extended, which is only because of the increase in size. Creature designed by Autismo. The outermost appendages on the first tagma are extruded and have some hair-like structures that allow it to sense for movement in the water and change in heat. But that's not their only purpose. They also catch the food before it's moved to the mouth and digested. The middle 2 appendages, as well as a derived proboscis, are used as mouth parts that hold the food before it is swallowed. And while they look sharp, they are only a bit harder than the other appendages. Geomastus lives primarily in the temperate and tropical mesopelagic and bathypelagic zones between Natash and Ras Al Khalb and southwest of Natash. Genetic ancestors: Diocete. Origin: Paleotagmata. Average length: 2.5 centimeters. And now we get to our first xenoradiaton of the day, the killer barrel. Intentor fectorum, also known as the killer barrel, is a predatory nectonic feather barrel which has developed its tentacles to be made of a hard keratin-like material, which it uses to stab what unsuspecting prey its rather primitive vision can find. Pictured here, a killer barrel attacks a kerber who has foolishly wandered above the tops of the spiral plants. Creature designed by the Draggy123 Tiger YT Otobnia, which is the only name I was given. But thank you, it's a very cool creature. Killer barrels are generally neotenous. Their feet never develop cement-secreting glands. Their feeding tentacles have had the fronds reduce in number and concentrate distally. The fronds are now more like claws, being hardened with a keratin-like protein. Inside the mouth there are also keratinous plates to help process prey. The feet are used to help steer and stop the animal as it moves through the water column. The breathing tubes are placed aborally to be used as a jet propulsion system. This allows the animal to move through the water column rather quickly when it needs to. Killer barrels meet by meeting oral end to oral end, and the male will release a spermatophore, which the female will then take to a rock. She will affix it to the rock and then expel several hundred eggs into it. The larvae only survive if they come into contact with a hard surface, either vertical or upside down to hang from, and then it feeds on microorganisms around it using filter-feeding tentacles, until turning to eat bobberts and other helpless herbivores, which it can find as it gets larger. This is essentially a reversal of the ontological modes of life of the ancestral feather barrels, although the larval killer barrels do not use any secreted cement to stay attached to the surface. Instead, they simply use muscular action and are capable of finding a new perch if necessary. Killer barrels live in spiral plant forests. Killer barrels hunt primarily through chemoreception and vision, although their vision is not particularly acute. They tend to simply jet towards and lash out at about anything that is about their own size or smaller that they notice swimming by. Genetic ancestors: feather barrel. Scientific name: Intentorfectorum subtilis. Origin: Xenoradiata. Average length: 5 to 8 centimeters. Adult length will depend on food intake during the larval stage. And now we are back to the Paleotagmatans with PropolioMesis. PropolioMesis is a descendant of Diomisa. Its tentacles fuse into just 2 horizontal tentacles. It is omnivorous and will eat whatever it can get its tentacles around. It swims by moving the fins on either side of it in opposite directions. It mates the same way Diomisa did, although the larva will stay suspended in the water until the fins develop. Their tentacles still have chemoreceptors, but they rely more on their front-facing eyes to find food. Here, a large PropolioMesis is pictured about to feed on a Bosio magno plant. Creature design by AMF Videos. While it may seem that PropolioMesis is closely related to the species of ProtoMessanidae, this is in fact a convergent evolution, and they are not very closely related. In this line, the fins have paired off into 2 sets of 2 pairs. Each set of pairs operates as a linked group and they are offset, with the anterior pair of the set being raised slightly towards the dorsal side, while the posterior pair in the set is lowered towards the ventral. This maximizes the amount of water that can be moved on the backstroke. The face appendages of the basal Diomisa are merged into a single pair of feeding appendages. The interplay of muscles and ligaments within the joined appendages has created the beginnings of a hinge-like joint about halfway down the appendage. This increases the strength of the feeding appendages at the cost of mobility. As a generalist, PropolioMesis thrives in a wide range of environments in the waters between Natasha and Ras Al Khalb, as well as the shallower regions south of Natasha. The feeding appendages are the main chemoreceptors, and the eyes are quite keen. Genetic ancestors: Diomisa. Scientific name: PropolioMesis magnus. Origin: Paleotagmata. Average length: 10 to 15 centimeters. Now we are on to the rock gut. The rock gut is a descendant of the feather barrel. The rock gut continues to be a filter feeder. Unlike its predecessor, who was out in the open, the rock gut has learned how to grow inside of rock, using the rock as its shell. In its early stages of life, it acts the same as the feather barrel, but in its last larval stage, it instead looks for indents and spaces in rocks. Using acids exuded by its feet, it slowly makes a hole in the rock. It then settles in and lets its growing tentacles and body slowly crack and widen the rock for it. The rock gut still has its ancestors' 5 eyes, 10 tentacles, one-way stomach, and root-like legs. The rock gut still broadcasts spawn due to its sedentary lifestyle. After death, the rock gut leaves behind a small opening for a plant to grow, organisms to live in, or as a pre-made dwelling for other rock guts. The name rock gut comes from how the creature could be seen as a mouth and stomach for a rock to anyone who doesn't look further. A small young rock gut is pictured here feeding. Creature design by NerdKing100. The rock gut's breathing tubes have moved up closer to the eyes and tentacles for need of open water to flow in, but this has also led to a new development that allows for plankton and such to be drawn closer to the mouth rather than accidentally floating to it. As a result of the need for the breathing tubes to go up on the body, the rock gut undergoes a form of torsion during ontology. Shortly after finding a rock to settle down on and beginning the sessile portion of its life, the rock gut's eyes shift to one side and down, while the breathing tubes shift up. The direction of this torsion is controlled by a single allele. The rock gut likes to live around the equator in deep water, but not too deep that it can no longer feel the sun. Thus it can be found surrounding the continent of Ras Al Khalb and closer to the southern end of Natasha. Genetic ancestors: the feather barrel. Scientific name: Viscerapetrum rober. Origin: Xenoradiata. Lifespan: 4 to 5 local years. Average height: 13 centimeters. And last but certainly not least, we come to the sound globe. Sound globes are predators of the abyssopelagic and hadal zones. Creature design by Willem de Zwieger. I hope I pronounced that right. Sound globes have 8 tentacles, which have 7 pink small hair-like things that can grab their prey. They have an air bubble on top of their body named a bell, and they have 2 small air-filled discs on their body for stabilizing in the ocean currents. Under the bell are gills, which makes it possible for them to gather oxygen for their blood. They move by moving their tentacles in a way to propel themselves in certain directions. They can also move by the water through using their gills. Since the food is scarce in the deep sea, this species is smaller than its ancestors to save energy. Instead of 9 centimeters in length of the filter globe, they are only about 5 centimeters in length on average. The stabilizing discs present in their body are no longer as crucial as before. This caused those discs to evolve to be smaller, with the benefit of saving energy. Without much light so deep in the sea, they gradually lost their eyes. They don't need eyes anymore if there is no light. This saves them energy. Sound globes reproduce sexually and are hermaphrodites. They reproduce through their mouth, mating oral end to oral end. One of the first things they will develop after they germinate is the ability to move. Once they know how to move, they will try to go about finding the nearest sounds made by other sound globes. Sound globes are filter feeders and predators of small nectonic organisms. They can digest their prey by moving their tentacles into their mouths. The prey is caught by their tentacles. These sound globes live in the deep oceans. Sound globes live mainly north of Yama and Natash and east of Arctica, as well as in the deep trenches of the ocean. Without eyes, sound globes have developed a different way of communicating. The muscles present in their air-filled head, called a bell, oscillate. This causes a sound to be made, from which the species derives their name. The vibrations this sound makes can be sensed by others of the species. This communication is crucial for finding mates and reproducing. The more communication, the better the species survives. This led to the sound globes with larger muscles on the bell getting the upper hand in natural selection. Genetic ancestor, filter globe. Scientific name, Abyssoglobos tumultuentum. Origin, Xenoradiata. Average height, 5 centimeters. Alright, well that's going to wrap it up for today. I hope you enjoyed this, and remember, there's more stuff to come for the Speculative Evolution project in Phase 2, and we're getting actually close to Phase 3. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. Thanks for watching, but before you go, I'd like to take a minute to say thank you to my patrons and channel members on YouTube. They help me make this channel possible, and without them, I couldn't keep going. Specifically, I want to thank my $20 and above patrons, Ben Tovand, Ian Chen, Sphincter of Doom, Chris Love, Henry Hutanen, and Bob Knob. If you'd like to join the channel or become a patron, links are in the description, and if that's not right for you, but you want some other way to help out, there's also an Amazon wishlist, as well as a Teespring store where you can get Dapper Dino merchandise. If none of that works for you, just liking and sharing this video really helps out. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur.
So you found the skeleton. How would you tell people that this is? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.